Since landing in Washington, D.C. yesterday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been nonstop busy. Earlier, I spoke with Delaware Democrat and Vice Chairman of the Ethics Committee, Senator Coons. Tomorrow, Senator Coons will be meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu. Senator, nice to see you, sir.
Great to see you again, Greta.
Senator, I know you're going to be meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu. Is there something you want to ask him or tell him? What are you looking for in this meeting?
I'm going to be urging him to reach an end to the war in Gaza, to secure the release of hostages, to deliver badly needed humanitarian aid, and to seize the moment. Now that Hezbollah and Iran and Hamas have all been significantly weakened, there is a moment here for Prime Minister Netanyahu to embrace the Saudi offer of recognition and reconciliation that would end the decades-old Arab-Israeli conflict in the region and achieve genuine security and peace. But to do that, he's going to have to first end the war in Gaza and agree to a path for Palestinian self-governance. That's something Prime Minister Netanyahu has resisted for years, but that should now be right in front of him as a possibility.
You know, I think everybody, or at least every decent person, wants peace in that region, but it's been quite a challenge. But in 2014, it was thought that Hamas was standing down, there'd be a ceasefire. They broke that on October 7th, of course. And, of course, they're still holding hostages. Yeah. And you and everybody else has said that Israel has a right to defend itself. Where does that line stop when Hamas still continues to hold those hostages, both dead and alive?
Well, that's why there needs to be a release of hostages, an exchange of prisoners and remains, a ceasefire, and a resumption of humanitarian aid. I'll remind you, Greta, when President Trump began his term, that's exactly where we were. There was a ceasefire in place, hostages were being released, Hamas was being steadily degraded, and there was a path towards a longer-term end to this conflict. It started up again. And the suffering has extended and continued. My concern for the longer term for Israel's security is that there doesn't seem to be a day after plan or an end in sight for fighting against Hamas in Gaza. There are regional Arab leaders eager to contribute to stabilizing the situation in Gaza and finding a better path forward. I've met with them, and I think it is possible for us to find a better path forward than the one currently underway in Gaza.
Okay, a couple of quick questions from what you said. Number one, what Arab countries have agreed to take any Palestinians if they want to move? I've seen none. In fact, they've resisted it. I mean, Egypt has held that barrier for so long. Two, are you blaming President Trump? You said there's a ceasefire in effect when he came into office. Are you saying that he is responsible for the break in the ceasefire, which I wouldn't agree with you, by the way? And then three, is this humanitarian city that's just got floated, is that realistic?
So I'm gravely concerned about the humanitarian situation in Gaza, and the efforts that have been made in recent weeks have not worked. They have not produced a safe or stable way to distribute humanitarian aid. I understand the concerns about aid being diverted to Hamas, but frankly, what is happening now is chaotic, and there are far too many people suffering in hunger and dying. No, I'm not blaming President Trump for the end of the ceasefire, but you asked what I would say to Prime Minister Netanyahu in our meeting tomorrow. And I agree with you. There aren't Arab countries who are saying they are voluntarily going to accept some of the millions of Palestinians in Gaza because regional Arab neighbors don't support the idea of relocating Palestinians out of Gaza. Probably the least constructive thing President Trump has done with regards to this conflict in the last 6 months was when he released an AI-generated video suggesting that Gaza be redeveloped as a oceanfront resort. That wasn't serious and it wasn't constructive. What he's doing now is constructive, sitting across the table with Prime Minister Netanyahu and saying it's time to bring this to an end. Frankly, he's also contributing to a constructive conversation about holding Putin accountable for his war crimes in Ukraine by potentially imposing sanctions and resuming military aid to Ukraine. It's utterly unclear exactly what President Trump intends or has in mind, but just this afternoon, in a cabinet meeting where he was asked by reporters why there was a suspension of military aid to Ukraine, he looked left and right and said, "I don't know who made that decision." It is possible for Trump to make a real difference here in securing a just and lasting peace in Ukraine against Russian aggression and in pressing Prime Minister Netanyahu to find a path forward towards ending the war against Hamas by ensuring Hamas does not control Gaza in any way and working to find a lasting regional peace.
You know, I guess the thing that, you know, this would end. First of all, it wouldn't have happened if October 7th had happened. Hamas terrorists hadn't done that. But if Hamas would surrender, you know, it would end. And unfortunately, when Hamas has that charter which says it will not negotiate with Israel, and it has done so much terrorism, it's really hard to believe that until they do a complete surrender, these terrorist leaders, that it really does end. So a lot of pressure put on Israel, but there seems to be not as much pressure put on these terrorist leaders.
Look, Greta, I assume we agree that Hamas is an evil terrorist organization. In fact, the reason that they launched this hateful attack on Israeli civilians on October 7th was to interrupt and stop progress towards a reconciliation between Israel and Saudi Arabia, which was actively being negotiated at the time.
Senator Coons, thank you and good luck tomorrow. And we all have the same goal. It's you know, we'd all like to see, you know, peace in the Middle East, and I don't know, maybe we're headed that way. Anyway, Senator, thank you, sir.
Thanks, Greta. Great.